said, how could you be so fucking stupid to kill people for people that want to kill you?
August 1991, Los Angeles County Jail, attorney interview room, 3rd floor. Rene Enriquez pulled a piece of metal from his waistband. It was the chrome end of a paint roller, sharpened to a point, with a t-shirt wrapped tight around one end for grip. The man sitting across from him was Salvador Buenrostro, a senior leader inside the Mexican Mafia. By the time it was over, Enriquez and his partner Benjamin Peters had stabbed Buenrostro 26 times inside a room with security cameras on the wall. Buenrostro survived. That is not the strangest part of this story. The strangest part came 14 years later. The United States government needed to hide Rene Enriquez somewhere inside the jail system to keep him alive. They booked him under a fake name and a fake charge. The charge was possessing a swordfish without a license. There was a real booking. There was a real file. There was a real case number. Before we go any further, drop a comment with the city you are watching from, and hit like if you want to hear the full story. This is Rene Boxer Enriquez. To understand how a man ends up stabbing a mafia leader 26 times inside a jail, you have to go back to a garage in Artesia, California in the early 1970s. Rene Enriquez was born on July 7, 1962. His father came from Clarkdale, Arizona. His mother came from Zacatecas, Mexico. They built a business called Resin Craft Decorating Industries, bought commercial real estate, and opened a liquor store. By any standard from the outside, it looked like the American dream. His father's plan was for his sons to come work with him in the family business. That plan did not work out. Inside the house, behind all of that, there was domestic violence. There was also childhood sexual trauma, something Enriquez did not speak about publicly for a long time.
I had a dysfunctional family. There was a lot of domestic violence that I witnessed and experienced some childhood sexual trauma.
His older brother Mark was a member of Artesia 13, a local Hispanic street gang. Enriquez was 11 years old when he started watching Mark's friends come around. They came to the garage, drank beer, smoked marijuana, wore creased clothes and Pendleton shirts, and carried themselves in a way that drew attention. Enriquez described it plainly in interviews years later. They had pull. They attracted women. That is what I wanted. Mark also used his little brother's small frame to commit residential burglaries. Enriquez was slim enough to fit through windows. Adults could not. His first criminal training came from his own family. The name Boxer came from a single afternoon at Montebello Youth Boxing Gym in Montebello, California. Enriquez and Mark walked in with no equipment. No shoes, no gear. They hit the heavy bag, tried to jump rope, and walked back out. On the way out, Mark said, "Boxer would be a good name for you." It stayed. Enriquez said years later, "I hated that name. I don't box." But it followed me for the rest of my life. He was 12 years old when he was jumped into Artesia 13. It happened behind a gas station. Multiple members beat him for several minutes. Mark was among them. Enriquez cried. They picked him up, brushed him off, and told him not to cry. He held the secret from Mark for 2 days. When he finally told him, Mark said, "You're in now." By 13, he was drinking heavily and smoking PCP. By 14, he had added LSD. He moved into armed robbery, targeting local convenience stores. He was involved in the gang rape of an 18-year-old girl. He went to juvenile detention. By his own account, none of that slowed anything down. In 1980, at 19 years old, Enriquez was convicted of multiple robbery charges in Orange County and transferred to adult prison. His first stop was county jail, where older members of the Mexican Mafia subculture began introducing him to the rules, the hierarchy, and the language. From there, he was transferred to DV-1, the Dual Vocational Institution in Tracy, California. Inmates called it the Gladiator School because violence there was constant and expected, starting from day one on the yard. On his first day at DV, a Mexican Mafia member named Roy Boy walked over and said, "You're Boxer?" "The carnales want you to do a favor." Enriquez knew immediately what that meant. His partner was a man named Puppet Martinez from 18th Street, a name that would appear in federal indictments years later. The weapon was the same type he would use on Buenrostro a decade later, a piece of metal sharpened to a point, wrapped in cloth for a handle. The target was a man called Angel from Santa Monica. The plan was simple. Martinez grabs him from behind. Enriquez stabs him. They did exactly that in the yard, on Enriquez's first day. Nobody was arrested. At DVY in that era, the standard response after a stabbing was to throw the weapon away, move the body, and resume normal activity. Enriquez lost 45 days of good time credit. He said afterward, "After that first one, it was like butter." In late 1989, Enriquez was briefly out on parole. He became focused on a woman named Cynthia Gavaldan. She was 28 years old, a mother of 2 children, and she was distributing drugs in the Los Angeles area within a network operating under Mexican Mafia oversight. Dealers working in territory the organization controlled were required to pay a street tax, a cut of their earnings sent upward, in exchange for the right to operate without interference. Enriquez came to believe Gavaldan was keeping money that should have gone up the chain. He had no formal proof. In the Mexican Mafia, he did not need any. A few days before Christmas 1989, Cynthia Gavaldan's body was found in an alley in Los Angeles. Enriquez had ordered her killed. Her 2 children had no mother for Christmas that year, or any year after that. He was later arrested and charged. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder to avoid a death sentence and received a life term. Asked about the killing decades later, he said, "I am not remorseful for everything. I would be a liar if I said that." Her children would show up to every parole hearing he would ever have. 1 week later, still in the same parole window, a call came in from a Mexican Mafia member named Benjamin Peters. A fellow carnal named David Gallegos had run from a gunfight. In the Mexican Mafia, that was a hard rule violation, and it carried an automatic death sentence. Enriquez agreed to handle it. He invited Gallegos to a dope house he was running. They talked for a while, kept things comfortable. Then Enriquez gave the signal to his partner Jacko to fix Gallegos a hot shot, a lethal dose of heroin injected without Gallegos knowing what it was.
We put him in a car, took him to an alley and shot him to death. Just to be sure. We were fairly certain that he was deceased after the hot shot, but just to make certain, we shot him.
Both killings, Gallegos and Gavaldan, happened in 1989, within weeks of each other, while Enriquez was out on parole. He went back to prison before the age of 30, carrying multiple life sentences. In August 1991, while inside Los Angeles County Jail, an order came down. Salvador Buenrostro, a senior Mexican Mafia member, had become a problem for the organization's internal politics. Enriquez and Benjamin Peters took the assignment. This is the scene from the beginning of this video. They chose the attorney interview room on purpose. It was the most protected space in the facility, monitored by cameras, surrounded by corrections staff, considered off-limits for violence. Enriquez and Peters brought handmade shanks inside and waited until Buenrostro sat down across from them. Then they moved on him. By the end, Buenrostro had been stabbed 26 times. He survived. Enriquez received an additional sentence of 20 years to life, stacked on top of everything he was already carrying. To pull this off required planning the room, timing the approach, concealing the weapons past guards, and the willingness to go through with it while cameras were running. Enriquez had done all of that. The story moved through the jail system fast. If a senior Mexican Mafia member could be stabbed 26 times in the room that was supposed to be the safest place in the building, then no room was safe. Shortly after, Enriquez was transferred to Pelican Bay State Prison in Del Norte County, in the far north of California near the Oregon border. He was placed in the Security Housing Unit, the SHU. His cell was a concrete box, no windows, nearly 24 hours a day inside it, alone. Pelican Bay SHU was built for the most dangerous offenders in the California system, those who had continued committing serious violence after entering prison, or who were identified as active organizers of criminal operations from inside. The design assumption was that complete isolation, sustained long enough, would eliminate a person's ability to function as a threat. Enriquez was there for 10 years. He was not eliminated. He ran a criminal operation from inside the cell. He communicated through kites. Handwritten coded notes passed hand to hand through a chain of inmates across multiple facilities. He had lawyers on his payroll who carried information in and out during legal visits. He had corrections officers who accepted money to look the other way at the right moments. The gang investigators assigned to Pelican Bay spent years trying to map the network he had built. They documented portions of it. The gap between what they could prove and what was actually happening was where Enriquez lived for a decade. In 1993, the Mexican Mafia issued a directive that received significant coverage in California newspapers. All drive-by shootings between Latino gangs in Southern California were to stop immediately. Several reporters and law enforcement officials described it publicly as an unusual gesture toward peace.
First was stopping the drive-bys, and then the horizontal integration of the mob from prison into the street gang subculture, where we appointed reps in each gang to communicate us.
And have those representatives tax the illegal activity in the area. California was divided into territories. Each Mexican Mafia member received an assigned region. Street gangs operating in those regions paid a percentage of their drug revenue to their assigned member. They paid for the right to operate. They paid for protection when their members ended up inside the prison system. If they refused, they went on the green light list, meaning any Mexican Mafia member or affiliated gang member who encountered them was authorized to attack or kill them without consequence. They were not ending violence. They were replacing unmanaged violence with violence they could direct and profit from. Enriquez used the word franchising to describe what they built. It was the accurate word. By 2002, Enriquez had been inside the California prison system for over 20 years. He had spent 10 of those years in solitary at Pelican Bay. He had ordered killings, carried out killings, run extortion networks, and directed drug operations across Southern California. The identity he had built, shot caller, made member, feared throughout the system, had taken a lifetime to construct. By that point, he began to change his mind. He had been inside the organization long enough to see a pattern he had not allowed himself to recognize before. Loyal members were killed over minor disagreements. Alliances between senior figures fell apart within months. Men he had considered close associates were moved against by the organization for reasons that had more to do with internal power positioning than with any actual rule violation. In his own words, the honor of the street was an illusion. He decided to leave. Leaving the Mexican Mafia was not a conversation or a resignation. Enriquez requested a transfer to the Sensitive Needs Yard, the SNY, a section of the prison designated for inmates who could not be safely housed in general population, including gang dropouts. The transfer itself was a public signal to everyone in the system. He went from being one of the most feared men in the California Department of Corrections to a dropout, a status that in prison culture carried its own serious risks. Members who separated from the Mexican Mafia were sometimes killed for it. Enriquez was not a low-level associate who had quietly faded. He was a made member with decades at the center of the organization's California operations. He knew a significant amount of detailed information. The organization knew exactly how much he knew. That fact cut both ways. The first time federal investigators sat down with Enriquez to begin a formal debrief, he was high on heroin. He had found a drug supply inside the SNY through a network of other dropouts. He described the first session. "I was violating everything I was ever raised to believe." He cried in the room. The full debrief process took approximately 2 years. During that period, he was cooperating simultaneously with the FBI, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department, the LAPD, and the California Department of Corrections, covering more than 20 years of organized criminal activity. His value to investigators was structural. He explained how communication moved through the prison system. He explained the role of what the organization called secretaries, female relatives of incarcerated senior members who carried orders outward and tracked money moving in. One example he provided was Sylvia Olivas, the sister of a Mexican Mafia associate named David Gavaldan. That is a different Gavaldan from Cynthia Gavaldan, The woman Enriquez had ordered killed in 1989. The same last name. No connection. His testimony on this structure became central to federal RISO prosecutions, targeting the Cantaranas organization and affiliated groups across Southern California. The indictments that followed sent multiple senior figures to federal prison for life. The government now had a problem that was a direct measure of how dangerous Enriquez had been. He was the most valuable gang intelligence source in California law enforcement history. He was also a permanent target of the organization he had just finished explaining to federal prosecutors. Moving him through the jail system safely required hiding who he was. The solution was a fake name and a fake charge. The charge selected was possessing a swordfish without a license. There was a real booking record. There was a real case file. There was a real case number. A law enforcement officer searching for Rene Enriquez would look under violent crimes, drug offenses, organized crime activity. Nobody runs a database search for unlicensed fish possession. The booking held for years. Enriquez laughed about it in a later interview. In 2015, the LAPD arranged for Enriquez to present on transnational gang operations to a group of police chiefs and business executives at a venue in downtown Los Angeles. Moving him there required clearing a building, deploying a SWAT team, and running a police helicopter above the route. The cost to Los Angeles taxpayers was estimated at tens of thousands of dollars. When the details became public, the reaction was significant. The department's position was that Enriquez's knowledge justified the cost. A man who had ordered a mother of two, killed over unpaid drug taxes, was being moved through downtown Los Angeles, with a security operation typically reserved for visiting heads of state. Both of those things were true at the same time. From 2014 onward, the California Board of Parole hearings found Rene Enriquez suitable for release on 6 separate occasions. Each time, the decision moved to the governor's office. Governor Jerry Brown reviewed the case and reversed the grant 3 times, in 2015, 2016, and 2017. His written reasoning was specific. He found that Enriquez demonstrated a shallow understanding of his own past violence, that his explanations about survival instincts and drug use downplayed the degree to which he had actively chosen and sustained a violent life for decades. Brown also cited the ongoing security risk. Enriquez remained a standing target of the Mexican Mafia. Releasing him would put him, his family, his parole officers, and anyone nearby in the path of an assassination attempt that was a question of when, not if. Governor Gavin Newsom reviewed the case in 2019 and reached the same conclusion. He deferred to the Gavaldon family and found insufficient evidence that Enriquez had genuinely reckoned with what his decisions had cost. At every one of these hearings, Cynthia Gavaldon's children were in the room. They were adults by then, having grown up without their mother. They had spent years in fear of gang retaliation. They showed up to every hearing and said what they came to say. The daughter's statement was direct. He took a part of our lives. Her argument was that no amount of cooperation with law enforcement changed what Enriquez had ordered or returned anything to their family. In July 2022, Enriquez went before the board a 6th time. His attorney, Laura Shepard, addressed the safety argument directly. They cannot deny parole on the grounds that he might be in danger. That is a risk he has the right to accept. The board of 12 commissioners voted to grant parole. Governor Newsom, citing the complicated legal history of the case, referred the final decision to the full en banc panel rather than issuing a reversal. The panel upheld the grant. Rene Enriquez walked out at 60 years old, 32 years, 6 months, and 4 days after he went in. He is currently in a witness protection arrangement. He owns a Cane Corso and a Belgian Malinois. He goes to antique stores and flea markets. He said in an interview,
And I used to think that gangster was being a gangster. Found that real gangsters, those are the guys that get up and work at 5 in the morning and work 2 jobs to put food on their table.
He walked into Artesia 13 at 12 years old. He walked out of prison at 60. 48 years between those 2 days. Rene Enriquez joined a gang at 12 because he wanted to be accepted. He got 48 years of consequences for it. The people running those gangs knew exactly what they were doing when they recruited a 12-year-old. They were not offering family. They were collecting people who had nowhere else to go. If this video reached someone who was thinking what Enriquez was thinking at that age, hit like so YouTube pushes it to more people who need to see it. Leave a comment with the city you are watching from so we know how far this story is traveling. If you are on a phone, the hype button puts this in front of people we cannot reach with paid ads. One tap from you could put this video in front of a 12-year-old before someone else gets to them first.